It's a very much of an honor to address you from a different forum than I did in Indianapolis as, what was it, 2014, I believe. But it's a distinct honor to be here tonight with you to further introduce a longtime friend, colleague, and an individual I have tremendous respect for. I mean, there's no doubt that Donald Boysie Bollinger, as we all know him, is a man of integrity and has certainly risen to prominence in his field. It's just a question, I don't know what field, because every field he gets involved in, he rises to the top. And that is indicative, and I include that even with international CEOs, that he is going to be the international president next year. And that is a collection of CEOs from around the world of Boysie's caliber, and he's going to lead them next year. And I think Boysie expressed to me on a plane, how many meetings you have to put on, Boysie? Yeah, more than you can probably count. But Boysie is a guy that, you know, and I'm glad to be, and I don't want to forget to do this, Paul Hardy, who was Secretary of State years before I was, and then became Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana, was a recipient, what, in '89, Paul? And, you know, he came up here with us, and I'm looking forward to that picture after with the three of us from the same fraternity chapter, so let's don't forget to do that. But Boysie started out in Lockport, Louisiana, down the bayou, so to speak, below New Orleans. His dad was in shipbuilding business, and Dad was very active in politics. And Boysie Bollinger has taken off exactly where his dad left off. I can assure you of that. He is a man that never had an interest, at least I don't believe in actually running for politics, but he's what we call a kingmaker in Louisiana, because I don't quite know if you can win public office in Louisiana without having Boysie's support, not only in name but financially. And Boysie has always been there for me. I know he was there for Paul before me and many, many, many others. But he's an individual that, as was depicted in that brief video, is a man that's given back totally as a mentor, Boy Scouts, United Way. If you come to New Orleans, the National World War II Museum, he was a board member of that for years. I could go on and on. If it's something to do with Louisiana and nationally, Boysie's there. Boysie, as long as I've known, he's been able to pick up the phone and call the President of the United States, and he actually answers. He visited with our current president just last week. So he is a man that each and every one of you as Phi Kappa Theta brothers should look up to what the possibilities are. But there's one thing that I want to say about him that I think is indicative. Boysie Bollinger is the same guy that I knew in 1967 to 71 that I went to then USL with. He's never changed. His friends are the same, from shrimpers to bank presidents and beyond. Boysie's still their friend. He knows their name, he knows their wife, and he treats us as if we were still going to his houseboat on a fishing tour back in college. And that says a lot about a man, because he's been as successful as you could possibly imagine in your dreams. But he's never forgotten where his roots came from. And Boysie, I mean that totally to you. Because not only is he a fast fraternity brother, he's a friend, he's a colleague, but he's just a decent human being. And his wife is likewise, and as you can see, they're giving back in every way they can to society at this point in their life. So, you know, I could go on and on about this man, but I think you get the picture. And I'm glad to bring up the, you know, Donald Bollinger, but we all know him as Boysie. And Boysie, come on up here and
give it to me. Now y'all take a picture. Hey.
It made it look like I was the winner again. He's generous, but not that generous. He said, let me get a picture with the man.
All right, thank you. All right. Thank you, Tom. I was a little nervous getting you to introduce me because The last time you introduced me, if you remember right, it was at a roast. And I can assure you that introduction was not nearly as serious as the one today. My other fraternity brother and predecessor in this award, Paul Hardy, I thought about getting him to introduce me, but his accent is so heavy that you wouldn't have thought I had an accent by the time he finished. And that film was made so long ago that it was before color. You know, they got this Technicolor now in the movies you can see. In fact, I understand they got some software out there that you can take this old black and white and maybe make it into color. It was a black and white day that day. We drove around New Orleans and we spent 4 hours to make that 3-minute video. The editors did a great job cutting out the good stuff. But you know, being part of the fraternity is a good step in the beginning of the rest of your life when you think about it. Because it creates an opportunity for you to have respect for others. It creates an opportunity for you to compete with others. And it creates an opportunity where in many cases you can develop the beginning of leadership skills. Leadership skills are very difficult to develop. And they really don't happen unless you do it. And I can assure you, you don't get good at it unless you make mistakes. And the more mistakes you make, the more you learn about what not to repeat. So everybody that you've ever met who you think is a good leader, I can assure you, didn't start off on a road that wasn't bumpy, that didn't have a lot of cracks and ditches to fall off into. But in every case, they were able to pull themselves out of the ditch, press on and learn from the mistakes they made in that leadership role. And the fraternity did a lot for me. It gave me wonderful friends, like Tom just referred to. We have a very unusual class in our fraternity. And Paul's a little bit older, but generally from those people who finished high school in 1965 to those people who finished high school or finished college in 1975, that space of people stuck together. And every year we have a Christmas dinner, and we have about 110 people show up for it. And people we haven't seen, we see once a year. And we can always get back to remembering times we had together in college. The good things and the bad things. The wonderful times and the not so wonderful times. The times we got in trouble, which actually our fraternity at USL has a habit of doing. But we all came out stronger for it. And leadership, in many cases, is developed through giving back. And if I could leave you with any thoughts today, it's that life is good, generally. And generally, we are takers. We take our wives' loves, or your girlfriend's loves, or your children's love. You take orders, or you give orders in your business. But remember that we should always give something back. We live in a society that opens its arm, especially in America, to volunteerism, more than any other country in the world. Philanthropy in this country is stronger than any other country in the world. And it gives people the opportunity to help others. And in many, many cases, it's an opportunity to hone leadership skills and take a more active role than just participation. Because every organization craves leadership. Craves leadership. If that is a vacuum in leadership, it just needs someone to fill it. Sometimes it's competitively filled. Sometimes you learn lessons that it's not always for the right reasons. But once you become a leader, you're sought after to lead over and over and over again. So I've had the opportunity to lead many, many things in my life, none of which are set out to lead, all of which are set out to help. And because there's this vacuum in leadership in most cases, the people who have proven themselves as leaders are sought after to lead more. The doers keep doing. The givers keep giving. The workers keep working. And not everybody wants to be a leader. Many, many people just want to participate and have somebody else set the tone, create the leadership goals, keep the activity levels high. And that's good because not everybody can be a leader. We need soldiers. I'm watching our president deal with tough decisions right now. But it didn't take him long to change out personnel when the personnel are not following directions he's setting. And it's the right thing to do. He's a true leader. People may not like him, and they may not respect him, but they can't argue with his leadership. And they can hardly argue with his accomplishments in private life and now in public life. So if I can leave you with something that you can take home, it's give back. It's volunteer. It's take some percentage of your time and some percentage, no matter how small, of your wealth, and help somebody else. Because none of us got where we are without someone else helping us. No one got here without having a good leader. And don't reject anybody who wants to mentor you, because we all need help in certain areas. We all need a hero. We all need to be faithful to ourselves. Thank you all so much for this wonderful honor. It is an extreme pleasure to be here and share it with the other recipients. It's one I never thought I would ever receive. So it's a tremendous honor, and thank you so much for having us.
So I wanted to start off with, you mentioned something that I think most of us have heard before, which is that you make mistakes along the way. Can you think back to relatively early on in your career where you had a hiccup or a ditch that you wound up in that you struggled through and that you came out on the other side of that might be interesting to the brothers?
Ooh, that's a long list. I had a problem in business. It was an engineering problem that we had caused in a lack of following procedure, and we caused some problems for one of our customers in the equipment we built for them. Correction was extremely expensive, which we, even though they were out of warranty, we said it was our fault, and we decided we were going to make it right. But the worst part of that is one of them was a public company, and the loss of earnings was going to affect their stock price. And I negotiated a deal that if he would reduce the cost of stocking his vessels, I would make up his profits so that his earnings wouldn't change, which was so far out of the realm of what the industry norm was. It was crazy, but I felt it was the right thing to do, that he wasn't harmed at all for some mistake I had made. And it was a terrible cost. Worst hit in our income ever. And yet the word of that decision spread throughout the industry and how strong Bollinger was to stand behind the work they did, even when it was beyond what was necessary. So I learned a big lesson that doing the right thing again is the right thing to do. And the second thing is that when you in debt to banks, and all of us are going to have debt at some point in your life. I know right now y'all don't have any credit card debt or student debt or anything yet, but wait till you get out. It gets worse. Start buying houses and college tuition eventually. But when you have debt, banks expect you to make the projections you are supposed to do. And most people, when they're having a problem financially, try to avoid the bank seeing it and try to cover it up until it's too late and there's a huge problem. And whenever I got into issues like that with the bank, before they even saw my numbers that I reported, I would call them in and explain the problem I was having. In every case, the problem resolved itself exactly like I told them it was going to happen. And consequently, I had a reputation with the banks that, you know, nothing goes perfect in life. But if you're honest and early with bad news, it's the best time to identify it. It's not going to change. It is not going to go away. So if you can identify it early with the banks, and the banks are your financial partners in transactions like that, they start to respect you much more, even when times are terrible. They know that you are honest, that you are going to hard work, and especially if you can give them an outcome that you can eventually achieve. Those are the two major things. I mean, I could give you all night of examples, but both of them, I think, deal with intellectual and business honesty.
Very, very good. Raise your hand if you're on an alumni advisory board for a chapter. I know, where are my cougs at? The last point that Boysie just made about bad news coming quick, all of us who've ever been involved as an alumni advisor, we like to hear bad news real quick and real straight so that we can be there for part of the takeoff and not just the crash landing. So that is, if you'll note that especially for my board, but very good advice. Boysie, another question I think that people would be interested in is, now as you look to identify talent amongst younger people, maybe it's a New Orleans leader or just somebody national, politics, business, whatever, what are some of the traits that you notice in young people that tend to be a signal to you that they're going to likely be a good leader?
The first 10 things I look at is attitude. Attitude, 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 attitude. You know, people with the right attitude can learn. They're very much receivers of good information. They have the right attitude, aptitude, and inspiration to do well. And if they have a bad attitude, it's just the reverse. And I always preach to my employees. I had 3,000 employees when I sold the business, and every one of them I met with every year, which is exhausting when you think about it. But I talked about attitude being one of the most important things on the job. Yes, you have to have a talent if you were a welder or a carpenter or electrician. But attitude is infectious. And it affects the people around you in both directions. Bad attitude infects the people around you. And if you go home and your wife is in a terrible mood or you're in a terrible mood, it affects the whole family. And if you go home and you're in a great mood or your wife's in a great mood, it affects the whole family. So I think attitude and the way you project your attitude is extremely important in your ability to succeed. And happy people do better. I wake up every day of my life happy. People said, "You're crazy." I said, "No, it's true." On down days, I'm happy. I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to have a good family. I have no major problems in my life. I'm healthy. So if you can be happy with yourself, it changes your whole life in your relationship with everybody you're around. So attitude, I think, is the #1 success driver that anybody can attain, and it's not easy. You do it every day. You don't do it sporadically. You think about it every day, no matter what your day is going to be. Just think of it as a learning opportunity and a great time to have a new experience, but have a positive attitude toward life.
You know, as you talk about leadership and the right approach to problem solving, I can't help but note that you're a resident, a citizen of New Orleans. Is there a story or an anecdote you can share with us where you saw an example of good leadership or positive progress coming out of the tragedy of Katrina in New Orleans a few years ago? The national news, we heard a lot of bad. But.
Tremendous positive leadership and tremendous lack of leadership. We had a mayor who started off before Katrina. He was a black mayor and really appeared to have the right direction. He was a good businessman. He was a CPA, not our typical background for mayor. and he started reforming a lot of the corrupt parts of government. And then Katrina came, and I really believe he had a nervous breakdown, and he couldn't make a decision. And I was pretty close to the process, and he would not stop you from moving forward if you pushed hard enough. He wasn't at the time correct. He's in jail now, so he's very corrupt, but at the time, but he wouldn't say yes. So it was very difficult. So you saw common citizens involved in the process who had to work around government to get things done, but they got them done. And I think I was only involved because I was relatively close to President Bush, and they needed a few Republicans in a very Democrat environment. So Don Powell, who was the chief representative of the president on scene, and Admiral Thad Ellen, who was the Coast Guard chief of staff at the time, both were good friends of mine. I was able to kind of maneuver around, but I watched great people do great things who had no role and no ability to do those great things except they just did them. And to me, there were tremendous heroes through that process. I don't talk about the ones who saved lives, and there were a lot of those. I'm talking about the people who got things done without any authority, and they just did it.
Much less serious, but also important. Where do you get the best po' boy, excuse me, in New Orleans?
At my house.
This is true. Boysie was telling our table that he likes to cook, and some of his fraternity brothers were saying they like to eat, and Boysie said, actually, I like both. So that's good.
It shows.
That's good. Well, I think you've been very gracious with your time. I just want to give you an opportunity to add anything, particularly for our undergraduate members, any final words of wisdom for them as they embark on their journey of leadership post.
Chances are, if you don't like to cook, you're not going to like to cook. My wife doesn't want to cook at all, which is the happiest thing for me, because she loves me to cook. So we made a deal when we got married that I would do the cooking, she'd do the cleaning, and we both lived up to our side of the bargain. So, you know, do things every now and again against the grain that you're not comfortable with. If you don't like to cook, try cooking something. Because you'd be amazed when you accomplish something that you really don't like to do, how much you feel better about yourself being able to do it successfully. Follow the recipe if you're not creative, but do something that's outside of your comfort zone. And the more you do things outside of your comfort zone, the more you'll be comfortable and have a large array of things you can accomplish that you have no idea today that you're able to accomplish. Think outside of the box and try things outside of the box. And don't hurt yourself in the process.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give Boysie a round of applause.